Gosh, taking actions sure would be nice. Welcome to this episode of Conditions in D&D. We're going to be talking about multiple things in this video, but we're going to start with the incapacitated condition. So, basic definition, while incapacitated, you can't take actions, bonus actions, or reactions. Well, when I say actions, it just kind of encompasses all of that. This exists almost solely just to kind of tag onto the longer conditions and is rarely seen by itself, but there is a few exceptions. Now, what's interesting is that this condition only prevents you from taking actions, but you can still move and talk, even though most effects that remove your actions through the incapacitated ability also remove your ability to move, but not always. Now, some conditions have the baseline for you to be able to use it not to be incapacitated. For example, Danger Sense, Feral Sense, Counter Charm, the dodge actions, these all require you to not be incapacitated, which the ones that require you to be not be unconscious rather than being incapacitated are normally a lot stronger than these effects because it's actually easier to get incapacitated than you may have thought. Effects that incapacitate you include the Enchantment Wizard's Hypnotic Gaze, the Grappled, Paralyzed, Petrified, Stunned, and Unconscious conditions, spells like Banishing Smite, which has a, sends you to another plane and you're incapacitated there, Banishment, Feign Death, Hypnotic Pattern, Modify Memory, one effective symbol, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and any spell that would impose one of those other conditions. Interestingly enough, well, normally incapacitated isn't a state which is ideal to be in. You can't benefit on sneak attack bonus against incapacitated creatures. Now, I don't think the enemy will normally be having sneak attack, but it's just something to keep in mind. Some monster effects also require the target to not be incapacitated, to avoid some effects like the Gibbering Mouther. It is possible to take some effects that impose incapacitated on yourself, but we'll get to that. What's interesting is, while not as advantageous as some of the other conditions, imposing the incapacitated condition on enemies can be just as advantageous in some cases. For example, range attacks have disadvantage while within 5 feet of the target while they are not incapacitated, which means if they're incapacitated and for some reason you only have ranged options or whatnot, you don't have disadvantage. Also, normally incapacity goes with something else that will often give you advantage on attack, so that won't be canceled out by the ranged benefit, which makes sense, right? If you're going up and shooting at a target, they're not going to move or anything because they're down. Also, creatures like the vampire or others that can go into some sort of misty form are technically under the incapacitated condition while in that form. Grappling and shoving automatically succeeds if the target is incapacitated. Additionally, you lose concentration if you are incapacitated, which means losing concentration is actually easier than you might think. Like, one way to become incapacitated is rolling on the wild magic table and turning yourself into a potted plant. And the Tomb of Levistus invocation, which can be a way to avoid like Gibbering Mouther effects by bringing incapacity on yourself, you want to be careful because it imposes the incapacity condition on yourself, which means it will remove any concentration you might have. A creature can't use legendary actions while incapacitated, and though nothing stops you from speaking, for some reason you can't telepathically communicate while incapacitated. I would leave that under the DM's discretion or based off of what sort of scenario it is, because it is a weird rule. Well, again, there isn't many effects that cause incapacitation. There are no absolutely no enemies that are immune to that condition, because it's almost never seen by itself, which means you can always count on it working. They may be immune to being paralyzed or stunned, but never incapacitated. The Create Thrall ability of the Great Old One Warlock allows you to touch an incapacitated humanoid and become charmed basically indefinitely. And once again, incapacitated is an easier to impose condition than you might think. While incapacitated on itself isn't that often seen in brag-worthy, one of the main ways to become incapacitated is through the unconscious condition. So what is unconsciousness? Well, an unconscious creature is incapacitated. They can't move or speak and are unaware of their surroundings. The creature drops whatever they are holding and fall prone. So there you have it, multiple conditions in one. Additionally, the creature automatically fails strength and dex saving throws. Attack rolls against them have advantage, and any attack that hits the creature is a critical hit if the attacker is within 5 feet of the target. Now that's a lot. Definitely not a good place to be in. There's basically nothing you can do while this condition is active. And interestingly, if you're using a polearm and don't make sure you're within 5 feet of the target, you're not going to get off a critical hit, so just be careful. But you might be thinking, darn, for some reason, even though there's an overabundance of martial classes in 5e, our party has absolutely none. But remember what I said earlier, when the target is incapacitated, you don't have disadvantage on ranged attacks while within 5 feet, and while within 5 feet, you still get off a critical hit because it's not restricted to martial weapons. Now, one of the main ways to fall unconscious, obviously, is by dropping to 0 HP. Now, you can end this condition by rolling a natural 20 or any sort of healing. But you are still technically under the unconscious condition if you are stabilized, meaning you succeed all your death saving throws, which still puts you in a terrible place for any enemies attacking you, since they can still get off that critical hit. Now, I didn't know this rule because it's almost never come up. If it's been 1d4 hours and the creature isn't healed but is stabilized, they gain 1 hit point. The human body is an amazing thing, or elf or whatever race you're playing. Fun fact, when you're revived from being like literally dead, you lose 1 level of exhaustion, because people realize that if you had 6 levels of exhaustion and you revived, you would just die again. I forgot to mention that in the exhaustion video, but ta-da! You can impose the unconscious condition on an enemy creature by using a melee weapon and to choose to knock them out instead of killing them outright, but you have to declare this immediately after the attack hits. If it's an important NPC or if it's some sort of boss, it's kind of under the DM's discretion, but isn't everything. Now, while you are asleep, you are under the unconscious condition, magical or otherwise, and you can end normal sleep by spending your action to force that creature awake, or they wake if they take damage. A sudden loud noise can wake them up. Whispers don't disturb a person who's sleeping unless their passive perception is 20 or higher and the whispers are within 10 feet of the sleeper. Now, I don't assume that any enemy would be stupid enough to whisper that close to you, but while other characters are taking watch, this could be a way to listen in on their conversation if you have really good passive perception. Normal volume speech can disturb the sleeper if the environment is otherwise silent, meaning no sort of ravaging winds or whatever. And the sleeper has to have a passive perception score of 15 or higher. So this makes sense. It's not about actively listening, because you can't, you're asleep, so it's based off of passive. Pretty simple. But interestingly enough, you may be thinking, oh no, that means that while I'm sleeping, enemies can get the jump on us and we're still unconscious. And it's not too easy to wake someone up. Well, fortunately, don't forget, long rest isn't all sleeping. It's 6 hours sleeping and 2 of light activity, which can be used to taking watch, one of the best options, or reading, or whatever. Trances still count as putting you in the unconscious condition since they're technically sleep. The Warforged is the one exception to this. They can spend 6 hours in a motionless state, where they can still observe everything around them. It's good, but the trade-off is you don't have a soul. Now, rage ends while you're unconscious. Makes sense, but not when you're incapacitated, which is better than a lot of effects like concentration. Well, rage is better than concentration for multiple reasons, but you know what I mean. Ways to get unconscious include flowing to 0 HP, as I said earlier. Casting astral projection puts your real body in an unconscious state. The catnap spell, which is a way of sleeping, within that 10-minute period. The Sprite and the Pseudo-Dragon's Poison actually can make you fall unconscious, but that's only if you fail the DC 11 save by 6. The Cultural Undrow have better versions of this, the Beholder Sleep Ray, Brass Dragon's Sleep Breath, amongst many others. Unconscious is not too rare of an ability, especially considering almost every combat, someone's bound to get unconscious. The effects of Eye Bite, Sleep Spell, Sleep Effective Symbol, are some other ways through spells to impose the unconscious condition. While it's pretty common to get unconscious, there aren't too many effects to impose it on other people. Now, ways to deal with unconsciousness are kind of weird. The Path of the Zealots Raised Beyond Death. This is only consciousness of falling to 0 HP, but basically it's pretty great. You make your death saves, but you're still up and fighting. The Samurai Strength Before Death, another 0 HP exclusive ability, etc. Now, again, some creatures are immune to the unconscious condition, but this is pretty rare considering imposing it is not that common, and most enemies you won't be knocking out instead of killing them, because I don't think any elementals, ghosts, or constructs are the best targets for interrogation. But pretty much any creature who can sleep can be unconscious. One strategy is if the enemy is unconscious through, say, a sleep effect, then everyone can ready their action until the last person in the initiative order attacks. While only the first person will get off that critical, since after they take damage they'll be up, they'll still be prone. And so all the players can benefit from that advantage, which, since it's similar in the prone video, but maximizing that economy is very important. Now, one of the things that people forget about is that they instantly fail strength and dex saves, which is interesting because they don't automatically fail the other ones. Now, while dex and strength are the most common, dex being the most common, that is, if you're attempting to be charmed, you still have a way to get out of it, but it is a good way to just instantly deal a lot of damage to already downed enemies if critting isn't always the best option for your particular scenario. Now, again, once they're unconscious through like a sleep effect, that lasts for a minute, which means you don't have to instantly attack them. You have some time to plan. You can cast spells like Hex or whatnot to prepare yourself and deal more damage when the time comes, or just run away. There are great uses for both these conditions. This is Sean from Day Contention, signing off.